We're back. Marc Patrone with you, hour 2 of the Marc Patrone radio program, right here on Saga 960. So very glad you could join us on this Friday edition of the show. Great interview with Barbara Kay, and big thumbs up from Jocelyn Bamford, president of the Coalition of Concerned Manufacturers and Businesses of Canada. Not surprisingly, a bit of backlash now to the speech, the acceptance speech. Joe Biden making it official yesterday at the DNC, at the Democrat National Convention, saying, yes, absolutely, he accepts the party's nomination. And a vote for Joe is going to be a vote for light over darkness. Except, I don't know, to me, I heard something else when he said it. And Miles Christen joins us from Wisconsin. And Miles, I want you to listen carefully to what Biden says.
If you entrust me with the presidency, I will draw on the best of us, not the worst. I will be an ally of the light, not the darkness. It's time for us, for we the people, to come together. And make no mistake, united we can and will overcome this season of darkness in America. We'll choose hope over fear, facts over fiction, fairness over privilege. I'm a proud Democrat, and I'll be proud to carry the banner of our party into the general election.
Okay, so no more privilege. So how does that fit in with his son getting all that money from Ukraine and getting money from China? I mean, his own son, Hunter, of course, was underemployed by Burisma. This is a major oil company, a gas company in the Ukraine. He was on the payroll. He was getting something like $80,000 a month, while Joe was a vice president. And so clearly that was a case for privilege because Hunter had no qualifications to be in that position. He was clearly getting all that money because of his connection to the vice president, being his son. I don't know. What did you think of that speech yesterday? Do you think that it's going to light a fire under Democrats in the United States?
Well, one thing I noticed, I was actually just listening to the speech before you called, and definitely he can speak pretty much okay on a teleprompter, but every single interview we've seen of him is just disastrous. Or when he's speaking live before a crowd, it's terrible. But can he pull off a speech when he's in a closed room on a teleprompter? I guess so. I'm surprised that they actually had Hunter, a video of Hunter speaking for the convention. I mean, there was just one person after another. Like, why? Why do you have Hillary Clinton speaking? Why do you have Bill Clinton speaking? I mean, it's like, what other terrible people do they not want to? What other terrible people should they not be associated with? Could they have found to speak? A
couple of things were missing from that speech. Not much mention of China, for instance, and the ongoing threat by China to the United States. We've heard Joe Biden speak in the past. Well, it's not a big deal. They're okay. They're good. They're decent folks. It's no big deal. And very little discussions around violence on the streets of U.S. cities. Hunter, or not Hunter Pence, but Mike Pence, the current vice president, came out and said, look, it completely missed the boat, Joe. This is about safety on the streets of so many American cities, including Madison, where you live. You're not far away from Madison, with violence everywhere you look in some of the city centers, thanks to groups like Antifa and BLM and their rioting, race riots, as well as you've got mayors, Democrat-leaning mayors taking a knee before these mobs and demanding the police departments, the various police departments, be defunded. So this is absolute insanity, and that's why the race in the United States seems to be tightening between the Democrats and the Republicans. Miles?
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, basically, I just saw some footage of Austin, Texas, that's all torn up exactly the same. They're downtown 6th Street area. Same thing as State Street, still boarded up months later. I lived in Austin for a little while, so I'm partial to there. And, it's like in both situations, in all the spots around the country where these Democrat mayors basically allowed people to repeatedly rip up the city, it's like, okay, so you allow people to rip up the city because you want those, few thousand blue voters to be happy. and then on top of that, they're not necessarily political the protesters. They're not necessarily even people voting. You should have been able to distinguish the difference between the issue and the sincerity around the issue, and okay, but this is destruction, and say no to destruction. And so by allowing all this destruction to happen, now you've basically taken thousands, tens of thousands more, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of business owners and employees that were negatively affected. I mean, there are businesses all over Madison that are permanently shut down because of this protest. Riots was the final, nail in the coffin. So those businesses are gone. Those people that work for them are out of a job, and that happened all over the country. So I definitely see how the riots are going to negatively affect the left. And it's crazy because in some part the riots have been funded by the people who want the Democrats to succeed. So they're, really causing problems to themselves in the end.
Miles Kristen joining us from just outside Madison, Wisconsin. Let's hear a little bit from Mike Pence. He was on Fox News today talking about the situation in the cities. And when we come back after that clip, Miles, I want you to talk about the fact that so many Americans now leaving a lot of these cities, whether it's L.A. or Seattle or New York. Let's listen.
As far as I could tell from Joe Biden last night and from any of the speakers. Instead, we heard that negative view, the criticism, the ad hominem attacks against the President of the United States, and all of it, with the exception of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, was bereft of any of the policy descriptions that you're going to hear next week. We're going to talk about what this president has done to revive this economy, rebuild our military, strengthen the constitutional liberties with conservatives to our courts at every level. But the Joe Biden, the Democratic Party, has been overtaken by the radical left. And while they didn't talk about it very much, their agenda is higher taxes, socialized medicine, open borders, abortion on demand, and efforts to cut and reduce support to law enforcement at a time of rising violence in our streets. And that's a choice we're going to make clear to the American people next week.
Okay, so there you go. It's about violence. It's about the economy. But in the meantime, we're seeing Americans saying, "Sayonara, New York. I'm not going to do this anymore. Taxes are out of my range of being able to pay anymore. I'm going to find a place at a smaller and maybe a red state." Are you finding that people have had enough in some of these cities?
I mean, I lived in Madison, Wisconsin for more than a decade. I actually owned the largest art gallery at one point on State Street, and last art gallery on State Street. And what I found was that I had to be very, very, very quiet about my political views the last few years that I was there, because to even have somewhat libertarian views, well, that basically then if you felt you were libertarian or even worse, conservative, you were basically thrown into the same basket as Nazis and so forth. And, so the only acceptable viewpoints were to either be a Democrat, a socialist, or a communist, or an anarchist. There was no, I guess technically you could be a green as well. But people are just pushed aside, and the cost of these cities are going up, taxes, crime. I mean, the crime is going up. We just had an 11-year-old child shot and killed. A few months ago, there was a doctor and her husband taken out into the woods of what was a good neighborhood before and murdered by these two kids. And then people, are actually trying to get one of the kids freed from jail because they act like the kid's a victim. I mean, it's the cities are falling apart, and it's just the level of insanity. I mean, we recently had a state Senate candidate in Madison, Wisconsin, who supported the toppling of an abolitionist statue. She also, was basically in support of the firebombing, the Molotov cocktail that was thrown into the juvenile correctional facility. But because she was of, this gender and this religion and so forth, and she was an immigrant and so forth, because she checked all the boxes, she was a great candidate, and people really got behind her and ignored the fact that she literally supported violence and destruction.
Isn't that amazing? And, of course, we have the squad. Although, interestingly enough, I see that Trump is starting to surge a little bit. In fact, the Rasmussen poll had his approval levels now at 51%. So, you know, I guess this must be sending a wave of panic amongst the ranks of the Democrats who are hoping that everything from COVID to George Floyd and the violence on the streets, that all of this was going to undermine Trump to the point where he was not going to be able to hold on in November. But do you think, are you sensing that maybe the tide may have turned as we have a rebound and as more and more people hear some of these Democrat mayors and so forth? For instance, Lori is it Lightstone?
Lightfoot.
Lightfoot of Chicago, saying, yeah, you know what, we have to have cops to protect my neighborhood. Meantime, it's okay for them to riot in other areas of Chicago, destroy and loot businesses, set places on fire, smash windows. But if you're going to come into my neighborhood, well, I'm going to have the cops protect me and my neighbors. So
there's been this tactic everywhere where the protesters are now showing up at people's homes, and it's really odd. And I mean, it's really irresponsible, because you don't know, if you're protesting someone's house, you don't know who you're bringing to that person's house. You could be bringing a psychopath to that person's house. It's just this whole tactic of bringing people to the homes of these people really is not good. And, I'll just say this real quick. I mean, in 2016, the Democrats ignored the plight of conservatives, and they thought the idea of Trump winning was so crazy, and they laughed at it, and Trump got elected. I would recommend people on the other side, even though I don't necessarily want anybody to win, I would recommend that nobody ignore the plight of tens of millions of people. And as crazy as it sounds that Biden could get elected, he actually could get elected. And there was a lot of weird stuff in that DNC virtual convention. I mean, a lot of it was cringeworthy. A lot of it was stupid. A lot of stupid music videos for some reason. But, somewhere in all of that, you could see that there were these people who are Democrat, who are liberal, who are suffering. I mean, the COVID has affected millions of people in a very bad way. And I mean, when somebody loses a loved one, how do you can't just ignore that. And this election, I really do think it could go either way at this point.
All right, let's just to your point, let's hear some protesters in Beverly Hills, what they were saying in a minute here. Okay, so they were saying, eat the rich, Miles. And guess what? This was going on in Beverly Hills. And the cops showed up there and cleared them out in a hurry. So, it seems to be one rule for protesters in one part of the city. But when it comes to rich folks, they get the protection and they get the cops, whether the police forces have been defunded or not. Anyway, I got to run, but I appreciate you coming on the show once again.
Thanks for having me.
That is Miles Kristen coming to us from just outside. He's within safe distance of Madison, Wisconsin. And we'll be back with more news talk after this.